welcome back to First Take Outdoors. This is Andrew Bolig here. It is currently March 28th, and we're just getting ready for trout season, T-minus, I believe 6 days from today. So today we're going to show you some of the gear that I'm planning on using for the first day, and some of my go-tos, along with some tips and tricks for trout fishing. I know all of you guys have your own setups. This is what I prefer to use for the area, and I found it work. But comment below what you guys have, and let's get right into it. Alright, so first up here we got the Shakespeare Ugly Stick GX2, which is a fairly new rod. Just acquired it 3 months ago, just in time for trout season. And it's a 5-foot light rod where I currently have 6-pound tri-line test, or 6-pound test tri-line on it, and tested it out a couple weeks ago. We have a nice area where it's delayed harvest with special regulations where we get to fish whenever we really want to, and action felt amazing on it. Sensitivity was great. Just overall a really solid product, and doesn't break the bank whenever you're getting it. Alright, so the second rod and reel that we have here is an LL Bean portable fly rod, 8'6", and I'm hoping to use this later in the season. Like, familiar with the fly rod, but still not amazing with it, so I'm hoping to pick it up as the season goes on, ideally, and try out some flies that I've tied in previous years. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's a great rod and reel. But yeah, I'm really excited to use this later in the year. But first, going to smack some fish with the Ugly Stick. Alright, so next up here, you can't catch a fish without the lure. So here's some of my go-tos for trout. And for my lures, they'll vary on species I'm targeting and also the conditions. But my go-to is the classic spinner or rooster tail. So right here is a rooster tail spinner. Absolutely love these. Smacks the trout like nothing else. Definitely caught the most of my fish using these, and just overall very consistent. No matter the weather or season, whatever species I'm targeting, always seems to get the job done. So here my other box goes to the lure that I use occasionally, not as often, which is the Rapala Husky Jerk. And these work great for targeting brown trout I found in my area, although I don't like to use them as much. Occasionally when the weather changes or whenever my spinners and spoons aren't working, I'll switch up to this, and it gets the job done for the most part. Especially in murky water, I found that these work a lot better than spinners. But overall, again, solid. Not my top go-to, but it will definitely get the job done when you're going for trout. So next up here, and these are going to be experimental, are these Zoom rubber minnows. I got these last year. Didn't really have a chance to use them, so I'm kind of curious to see how the trout will hit them, considering they hit some of my other hard lures. But again, experimental. If they don't work for trout, then I'll just use them for bass and other species. But I'm looking forward to trying it, and you know, if it works, it works. Great. It also leads to some of these new ones, which I just recently got off of Cabela's. Lots of spinners and rooster tails. Again, my go-to. You can never have enough of these, and different patterns will hit in different weather. I found the gold ones work the best, especially for trout in our region, especially with the stock trout. So I'm looking real forward to breaking these in coming up Saturday. Alright, next up here, something real special. So if I can get this open, we have some hand-tied trout jigs from one of my father's customers that gave them to him, and then my dad gave them to me. These things are awesome. So they're lead heads with whitetail deer tail used as a trail.
Pull them all out.
Looking real forward to using these. Want to see how they work, but all sorts of different sizes. It's all handmade. It's going to be awesome to use these. And all sorts of different colors. I think they're going to work real great, especially on these stockies and brown trout in particular. I cannot wait to try these things out. So here we have something that is a little more uncharted for me, but here are some of the flies that I've tied over the years that we are hoping to use for the first time this year, as well as some flies that I've purchased over time. The goal here was to mimic different insects that the trout would be nailing at different points of the season, and did a fairly decent job with it, but definitely still progressing. But I'm real excited to get to use these this year and hoping to smack some trout with them. Next up, we have the pliers, which these come in handy in all sorts of situations, whether it's trying to get a hook out from a fish that swallowed it completely to even just cutting your line when you're tying on a new lure. So these are stainless steel, so anti-rust, and they've worked great. I've had these for about 3 years. Never had a problem getting a hook out of a fish mouth with them. And so you can see maybe right here, they have small razor blades that you can use to clamp down and cut your line when you're tying on a new lure, or if you get snagged up too bad and you got to cut the line, also gives you another option. But overall, great pair of pliers, best I've owned yet. And finally, for one of the last items is the net, which makes your life 100 times easier when you're trying to get a wiggling fish off the hook in the middle of the creek. But for trout, well, for any fish, I always go with the rubberized net, because I found with regular traditional string nets, they get all caught up when they're flailing around, and it ends up hurting the fish when you can't get it in the water as quick, and it also makes your life 100 times harder trying to get the hook out. But great net. Been using this one, I believe, this is probably my 5th season with it. Just gets the job done, nothing fancy. So now for some tips and tricks. We're going to have Grant here asking a few questions that he has, and we'll give you the answers.
So Bolig, how does having an idea of your surroundings when fishing impact your experience?
So having an idea of your surroundings is going to play a huge role in your overall fishing experience. If you pick a spot that you think's good and you get there, you don't know what's in there, for all you know, you end up on a tree that's lurking underwater that had fallen down in the past,
right,
or shallow water, rocks and stuff like that. And you risk losing your lures and just getting frustrated and taking the joy out of it. It's not fun when you spend the whole day stuck in a tree or stuck on some rocks. You want to be catching fish. So
right.
Overall, knowing your environment and where you're fishing makes a huge difference in if your experience is going to be good or bad.
Okay. So question 2, how does the water temperature impact everything?
So it impacts your everything in certain ways.
Yeah.
So the first being for the fish. So trout, being a cold water species, if the water gets too hot, they're either 1, not going to bite, or 2, they're just going to die. Plain and simple as that. So you got to keep an eye on your water temperature, and when it's hotter, you're going to want to hit those deep holes. Well, if it's cooler, the whole creek's free game.
Okay.
And it also plays a difference into, for example, if you're wading. If you're wading out in cold water, have an idea of where you're at and don't be stupid with it. I can tell you from past experience, and this was a few years ago, I got too far out in the middle of the creek, early April, and stumbled on a rock and fell in.
Oh.
Water absolutely freezing. Now, it wasn't cold enough to do any damage or anything like that, but if you're in the water when it's too cold and you fall in, you risk going into shock, and if there are people not around, your waders will fill up and
right,
you risk drowning. So having an idea of what your water temperature is not only going to be a factor when you're trying to catch your fish, but also a factor for your own safety.
For yourself. All right. Last question, question number 3. What are ways to be respectful when fishing public areas?
So this right here is a great question, because not everyone knows this, as I've seen in the past from fishing opening days of trout.
Right.
So when you're fishing, everyone's trying to have a good time. Everyone's trying to catch some fish. Be respectful of each other. Don't be on top of each other. Don't be getting up in people's faces if they're in your spot or something like that. Just have some decent respect. If it's public land, now private, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Stranger on your land. But if it's public, just be respectful to everyone, and they'll be respectful back 99% of the time. And you all have a good time and catch some fish. So just be respectful.
Well, thank you, Bolig. You answered all my questions. Perfect.
Thank you all for watching. And hopefully these tips along with the gear overview has helped you. If you have anything else, leave it in the comments, or any questions, leave them for us. Go hit that subscribe button, share, and go out and smoke them.